Well, we're back kicking off 2024 with our next market update for the year. Well, our first market update of the year. But since our last market update, it's been about 3 months, and things have, we told the future in our last market update. We were correct on our predictions, so that's a big win for us. Always feels good. But just wanted to get back in touch with our viewers and our clients and talk to them about what we're seeing for this next quarter. And then hopefully if this continues to go well, we'll pick up in March and let them know what's going on then. So James, tell us what you've seen in the market since, let's say, roughly October or so.
Yeah, the last time that we spoke, like you said, about 3 months ago, kind of as we were kind of getting into the final quarter of 2023, and that was in early October. And really, middle October seems to be when things peaked, at least as far as interest rates go. In fact, I can even pinpoint the exact day. It was October 20th when I was looking at various data that was on the screen there, and I called some people in my offices and said, if I'm reading this right, I think this may be the worst that it's going to get. And sure enough, you basically look at the last 80 to 90 days, and interest rates have dropped over a point since October 20th.
When you say they've dropped over a point, what does that mean from a consumer standpoint? Because for us, we know that's a huge deal, but what does that mean for somebody as far as purchasing power? What does it mean from a qualification standpoint to say we've dropped over a point?
Well, essentially, we peaked in the mid-8s, and we're now down closer to 7. And if you take, say, a $500,000 house with a 10% down payment, so say a loan amount of $450,000, the difference in that payment, let's say between an 8% and a 6.5% rate, is roughly $500 a month.
Wow.
So you're seeing substantial savings just from rates going from where they peaked to closer to where they are now.
Well, and obviously that increases the affordability for the buyer as well, because if they were having a debt to income problem where they were kind of coming up the ropes on their debt to income ratios, now that rate drops and it frees up $500 worth of available income, if you will.
Yeah, for the average person, it's almost like they just magically got rid of a monthly car payment.
Right.
Essentially is what it's done.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, if they could magically get rid of a car payment from a debt-to-income ratio perspective, from a mortgage qualifying perspective, a lot more doors would be open to them. So it's a really big deal what's happened to interest rates just in the last 90 days. And what's interesting with that is largely what caused that drop that we've seen since the middle of October to interest rates is the Federal Reserve kind of going out publicly and stating and acknowledging that they were essentially done with hiking the federal funds rate. We haven't seen any decreases to that rate yet, but they just said we're at least going to pause. Let's let the dust settle a little bit. Let's see if what we're doing is working, oversimplifying a little bit, of course. But we saw that big of a drop to interest rates just from a pause to the Federal Reserve raising rates. We haven't even seen what will happen to interest rates when the Federal Reserve starts dropping the federal funds rate,
right,
which is projected to really see our first drop in March 20th to be exact.
So maybe we're predicting the future again, and we can circle
We
back
very
in
well may
March,
be.
and
We very well may
we
be.
might have been done it again.
Most people are anticipating about 3 drops to the federal funds rate in 2024. I think that's a conservative number. I think realistically we may very well see 4 or 5 of them. The federal funds rate right now is in the mid-5s, so we could easily see it get closer to the mid-4s by the end of the year. And if that happens, we'll see interest rates quite possibly below 6%, maybe even getting into the high 5s.
Well, and I mean, I just think back to whenever I got into real estate in 2014, and the rates were in the 6s, and people were celebrating rates in the 6s and talking about how they were the lowest rates they had seen up to that point, and yada yada. And now, I think once there's a little bit of confusion in the market is what I'm seeing, like boots on the ground from the real estate standpoints, because people are saying, well, what's happening? Well, we're seeing on some homes multiple offers already. We're seeing some homes that have 30 days on market. What's the difference? Well, I think the confusion in the market is the difference, because now they're just starting to come out in the media and say, okay, now's a good time to buy. Dave Ramsey's put his stamp of approval on it. Now's a good time to buy. And so people are slowly waking up to that. But we've been in a very fear-driven market for the last 18 months because of the rate hikes. And so it's getting that comfortability back up. And I think we will start to see that home that is perfect, that is in multiple offers, that it has a trickle down effect to the market in other markets that maybe aren't seeing multiple offers yet.
And I think some of that is seasonal as well. My mentor in this industry used to say that, business was slow in December and January because in December they were charging their credit cards up in anticipation of Christmas, and in January they're paying their credit cards off. And, then you'd start to see things pick up in February. And then, of course, everybody wants to move during the summer because they don't want to move their kids during the school year. So right around spring break is when you really see the uptick in the market. And we're already beginning to see some of that change as we've gotten comfortably into January. For example, I personally took more loan applications in the first 10 days of January than I took in the entire month of December.
Right.
So we're really seeing some of that pent-up demand start to loosen up and come through the gates now.
Well, and luckily, the stats are coming out, and DFW is the second most sought-after real estate market in the U.S., just behind Austin. So Texas is really where it's at, and we're so lucky to be here, and homeowners and in the industry that we're in Texas, because we have created a very good insulated environment for investing. And so whether that be on somebody's homestead or second properties or vacation rentals, whatever that looks like, people are making money on their real estate here, which is amazing because you can feel great about putting somebody in a home knowing that their appreciation on that home. We were talking earlier, what did you say? If somebody bought a home today, they would make like $25K.
Well, yeah, the example that I used was for 2024, the national expectations are somewhere around 5% appreciation of home values. Now, to your point, Texas fares a little better in that kind of stuff because more people are coming here than not. So more than likely, we'll see something closer to 6 or 7% appreciation in home values, particularly in the DFW marketplace in 2024. But let's just be very conservative and say it was just a flat 5% appreciation. If somebody buys a $500,000 house, and let's just say they decide to put 10% down. So they put a $50,000 down payment into the transaction, and they finance $450,000. On a $500,000 house, 5% appreciation from one year to the next is $25,000. So for a $50,000 investment, $25,000 of appreciation came into that transaction. That's a 50% return on investment in just 12 months.
Right.
The stock market doesn't tend to offer that. I'm not even sure if crypto gets to those kind of levels. But that's just a tremendous return on investment. And it's why you go back to the old adage of when is the right time to enter the housing market? Today.
Yeah.
Yesterday would have been preferable.
Right.
It's always a good time to get into the housing market because over time, it is one of the surest investments the U.S. economy has ever seen.
Well, and I was talking to my best friend this last week, and we were talking, her mom is getting ready to do some investing in real estate. And her only complaint is that nobody told her before this point in her life that she should have been investing in real estate because I love when that light comes on for people that's like, oh my gosh, I haven't missed the boat yet, but what could I have done if I bought rental homes back in, 2000 or 2008 or 10 or 15? And
we may scoff at some of these prices. You look at some homes that, you pull them up on realtor.com or whatever, and they're selling for $250, $300 per square foot. And you want to pass out and fall over in your chair. But the reality is 10 years from now, we'll look back on some of those numbers and go, man, if only I could have gotten into the market when it was $300 a square foot.
Exactly.
Instead of $400 or $500. That's, and that's the ugly side of inflation. We think of inflation as a dirty word, but the reality is it drives number one, it drives the cost of everything up, but it also drives the value of everything up in tandem with it.
Sure. And I think it's just being in ownership gives you this edge and this win that people just don't realize until they go to make that first sale or they go to leverage the funds within their home in a different kind of way, whether that be like a home equity line of credit or something like that, to where they can really see those fruits of their labor, because it's one of those things that just drafts out each month. You're paying for the roof over your head and not realizing the amount of capital that you're actually gaining under like your assets.
Well, you talk about paying for the roof over your head in a vacuum, in isolation, that's a true statement. But the question becomes, are you paying for your own roof or are you paying for somebody else's roof to be over your head?
Right.
Because as prices go up, nearly 20% of all mortgage transactions are investment properties. And as the price of homes go up, so do the price of homes that people buy to put renters and tenants into those homes. And if that's you, then the cost of your monthly rent is going to go up in tandem. And unlike a fixed rate mortgage, where at least your principal and interest is fixed for the life of that loan, thereby being a hedge against inflation, every time the rent policy comes due for renewal, it's going up 10, 15, 20%. And so the cost of rent is going up. So you have to pick your poison. Do you want to pay rent, or do you want to pay a mortgage? One of them is going to be more stable than the other. That's the mortgage. The rent is going to be more volatile, more aggressive in terms of how it negatively impacts your monthly budget. So you just got to pick which one do you want to pay for every month. And over time, not only do you get the appreciation of value when you are the homeowner, but you also, in addition to your appreciation, get your amortization, which is really just the fancy way of saying, as you pay the balance down, you have more and more equity in the property. So you're really benefiting from both the head side and the tail side of the coin when you are the actual homeowner.
Well, and in a market like this, what we're seeing where there is some confusion and some people are moving forward and some things are moving fast, some are slow, there's so much opportunity in that, because if you're targeting the right homes, you can essentially be purchasing a home for very little money out of pocket, because a lot of situations we're still seeing sellers paying closing costs to help that buyer out.
I got 2 contracts over the weekend, both with seller concessions.
Yeah, see, so it's you may need to kind of temper those expectations as the market continues to rise, as it is, of what you're going to get with a seller paying closing costs, because I do think that we'll see that slow down as more buyers start to come back out. But that's what makes right now such a good time, is it's like that little sweet spot before things heat up, both physically and, metaphorically in the market. Is because when the temperature rises, people are going to get out, they're going to start looking at homes, and that competition is going to go up.
And there is a lot of pent-up demand. We've talked before about how, on average, nobody's going to trade a 3% rate for an 8% rate unless there's kind of a life-changing event. You have a child and you need more room, or your job is transferring you to another city or something along those lines. But as rates fall into the 6s and potentially into the 5s in the future, a lot of people will trade a 3% rate for a 5.5% rate for that third-car garage,
right,
or that half-acre lot or whatever it is they want. So there's a lot of pent-up demand. The average mortgage only lasts about 7 years in the United States. So right now there's a lot of people who have the proverbial golden handcuffs, where they feel like they have such an advantageous financial situation that there's just no way that they can sell their house, even if they might want to sell their house.
Right.
And I know a lot of people who are in that position, that as soon as they feel like there's just a little bit of release, a little bit of leverage in the market, they're going to put a for sale sign in their yard very quickly.
Well, and with rates being just slightly under 7 now, if you get those concessions, you're buying down a rate that's in the 5s or in the low 6s. That is a very viable rate.
And even without a buy down, whether it's a permanent buy down or a temporary buy down, most people who have bought a house in the last year and will be buying a house for most of 2024, the confidence level that they're going to have a favorable refinance opportunity in the next couple of years is pretty high. Everybody's heard the phrase, marry the house and date the rate. And that's a cute phrase to use. But it does underscore a simple economic principle and reality, which is that there is fluctuation and there is movement in markets over time. There's certain factors long term that you can't control, but one of the ones that you can control is, are you going to buy at today's prices, or are you going to buy at next year's prices, or the year after that's prices? And they will only go up from year to year.
Right. And speaking of this year, it's kind of a unique year because we do have a presidential election coming up. As we're shooting this today, it's just had the Iowa caucus last night. And so
primary season is upon us.
It is. And so with that, not one way or another, but we feel like that's also going to be a big driver in the market of things we're going to see rates-wise moving into the year and moving into this election season.
Yeah, 2024 will be an interesting year. I've done this, I guess through 5 presidential election cycles now, and there is a pretty consistent, ebb and flow with interest rates in election years. we have two things that should work in favor of mortgage rates, one natural and one artificial. The natural one is just the economic reality. There are a lot of economic factors and economic reasons that should push interest rates down as inflation continues to level and steady out. Anybody who's been to the grocery store knows that it's not suddenly cheaper to buy groceries than it was 2 months ago, but we're not seeing the same drastic rise in prices that we were
Right.
6 or 12 months ago. So inflation, while I wouldn't say the cost of goods is coming down, they're leveling out. Incomes are coming up. On a national level, incomes have risen 13% since 2021. So as incomes rise and the price of goods and services moderates, everybody kind of over time turns out okay there. So there are economic reasons to think that rates are going to come down, but there's also political reasons. The reality is Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve right now, he was put in place by President Trump. He was never really a personal fan of President Trump. When President Biden came into office, he wanted to replace Jerome Powell, but was counseled against that. So Jerome Powell's in a little bit of a no man's land where he's not really beholden to anybody, regardless who's in office. But the reality is there is a lot of political pressure that gets implemented and pushed upon the Federal Reserve to try to make things look as appealing as possible when millions of people and tens of millions of people are going out to the polls. And I think there's a lot of reason based on historical trends. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And in the past, in election years, particularly presidential election years, we tend to see a lot of political pressure put on the Federal Reserve to try to put a shiny bow on things. So we should kind of have some positive, elements impacting rates downwards. Whether or not it's a wise decision for some of those things to be happening, that's another video cast for another time. But it's the reality of playing the hand we're dealt. Those things should impact interest rates, pushing them down. We should see that beginning in March. We should see some big movement towards the middle of the summer, towards the end of July. And really in the second half of the year, I think we'll start to see that snowball effect with rates really beginning to tumble.
Which will make an excellent opportunity for our clients who have bought and trusted us through this over the last 18 months, these kind of rough seas that we've been upon. 18 months to what will end up being 2 years, that they will finally have that kind of break in the clouds to have their refinance opportunity as well.
Yeah, and there's a tendency too, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to wait until rates come down to buy. It'll be a little more favorable for me at that point in time. As we discussed, more people might be willing to sell their homes. So there'll be more inventory on the market. The problem is those sellers, more often than not, are also going to be buyers. They're not going to go live in tents somewhere.
Right.
They're going to have to purchase a home as well. So as rates come down, you're going to see more and more homes enter the market, but that's going to bring more and more buyers with it. And it's going to create your basic economic problem of supply and demand. Right now, the reason why with rates peaking in the mid-8s, we didn't really see values come down much. We saw them maybe plateau a little, but we didn't really see them come down is because there's simply not enough inventory, both nationwide and in the DFW marketplace.
Yeah, I believe the stat as of yesterday or today was we're sitting somewhere in the Metroplex, depending on hyper locally where you're at, between 2.7 and 3.7 months of inventory. And realistically, what that means is that we need 6 months of inventory for buyers to actually have options.
Yeah.
So if we were to sell every home on the market to the buyers, it should take us 6 months to run out of homes in a balanced market. And right now we are still sitting under that by quite a bit is what we need to be able to keep the market afloat and business moving.
Yeah, so as rates come down, you're only going to exacerbate the inventory problem. And, when did values start skyrocketing? Well, it was during 2020 and 2021 and part of 2022 when rates were in the 2s and then the 3s. Now, we won't get to that level again, barring some kind of economic debacle. But as rates do come down, prices are going to go up even faster than they have been over the last 12 months or so.
Well, and I say this phrase about as often as I say the phrase, I grew up in Mansfield back when we only had the Cha-Chas and the Brahms, or you had to drive clear to Arlington for Red Lobster or whatever. But it's one of those things where it's, in 2018, we literally high-fived at the closing table over 4.625 on my personal home. Like, we were super proud of that rate on an FHA loan, and it was like the best rate for that day and without having to pay any points. And it was something to be celebrated.
Well, we talked last time we did this a few months ago about how, the reality is where rates have been over the last year or so is pretty close to the 50-year national average. Just the problem was that nobody had seen those numbers since the last time the Dallas Cowboys won a Super Bowl,
Right.
which
womp
we'll be waiting one
womp.
more season.
Moment of silence.
Thought I'd have more to go with that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No, we're just actually really sad about that.
yeah, R.I.P. Mike McCarthy.
But yeah, so I think, back to that devastating thing that is the Dallas Cowboys to the thing that's not so devastating, the DFW housing market.
Yeah.
I mean, people who have been in ownership and haven't realized their profits yet, it's just call an agent, whether it be me or somebody else you know and like, and have them just run the numbers on your house, because you're going to be blown away at how much equity you have just sitting there in a glorified savings account for you for when you get ready to make that move. And that's what you're saying. You keep referencing this 10% down number when we're talking about people getting a loan, which isn't even what you would actually need to buy a house.
Yeah, that's just a hypothetical. We'll throw that out there because everybody can divide by 10 easily.
Most people are in a position to at least do the 10% down now because of their
Yeah,
what
if we
they
go
own.
back a few years ago, most people purchasing a home put close to the minimum down. Now, the minimum down, depending on the product, can be as little as 5% or 3.5% or 3% or even 0% in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But we saw a lot more of kind of those minimum down payments. Now, most of the contracts I get have 20 to 30, sometimes 40% or more down because they're selling their homes and they have so much equity in their existing home. So even though their eyes might want to pop out of their head at the sales price they're paying for the new house, their mortgage payment actually isn't that bad because they're putting so much money down. They're usually avoiding the private mortgage insurance that comes when you put less than 20% down and things like that.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that when we sit down with people, kind of with pencil and paper and really go over the numbers, a lot of times what seems like an intimidating housing market really isn't very intimidating once people kind of see it broken down for them on paper. But to your point, that's kind of part of the key to remember is that, a lot of people think you've got to put a lot more down to get into a home than you really do.
Right.
There's a lot of options out there. Again, I don't have any hard data in front of me, but after 21 years of doing this, anecdotally, I can tell you most borrowers put the minimum down, which again, depending on the loan, is anywhere from 0 to 5%. And then to your point, because of where we are in the market right now, if people can kind of time this a little bit before things get out of hand, we are still seeing seller concessions on a fair amount of contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got people buying houses for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 or whatever, and really not coming out of pocket with anywhere near as much money as you might think they would be.
Right.
If you're working with people who have seen a thing or two and know how to structure some of these contracts.
Well, and I'm seeing buyers and borrowers simultaneously pay off a ton of debt. So it's like, not only are they getting out of selling their home, making and realizing a large profit, but then they're using that money to put a big old chunk down on a new home, put them in a better financial situation from a payment because more of their own money is going towards the principal than, like you're saying, mortgage interest or insurance or something of that nature. And then they're also able to pay off all their debt that they've accrued over, the last few years with things kind of going up unexpectedly and things like that. And I don't think enough people are looking at their homestead or the property that they own in general as a way to leverage your debt to kind of get you out.
Yeah, there's two scenarios that I've run into quite a bit over the last year or so. Number one is, we'll have people who sell their home, they net a lot of equity, and maybe let's say they want to put 20% down because they want to avoid the private mortgage insurance. But they might have a bunch of debt that's costing them a couple $1,000s a month, whether it's car payments or credit card payments or student loans or whatever. One of the things that I've often counseled people with, I say, tell you what, let's put 15% down. Yes, you'll have a little bit of PMI, but it will be eligible to fall off after a few years, not the end of the world. It's not very expensive at this point. And instead, let's use that 5% difference and go pay off all this other debt. Maybe we added $150 a month to the mortgage payment, but we got rid of $1,100 a month of other debts.
Right.
So they really came out with a good net. While this isn't quite as relevant to the home buying experience, The one refinance that I've done quite a bit of over the last year or so is cash out refinances, where people might owe tens of thousands of dollars of debt. For example, we've all seen the data that credit card debt has recently topped $1 trillion, trillion with a T, in the United States of America. More than likely, some of that's our clients.
Right.
So we've done some cash out refinances where, maybe people are trading that 3% rate for a higher rate, adding a couple $100 or a few $100s to their mortgage payment, but getting rid of thousands of dollars.
With like a 29% interest
Yeah, when
rate.
you start looking at blended interest rates,
Right.
okay, maybe your mortgage rate's low, but if you're at 29.9 or 24.9 or 19.9 on this $70,000 worth of debt over here, you start blending it, putting it all together, really trading that 3% mortgage rate for an 8% mortgage rate and getting rid of all that. Pretty wise financial decision.
Right. It's going to put you in a better monthly position once you can start looking at that. And that's one of the things that I actually respect about you most is when I send you somebody, I know that you're looking at the big picture for them and really serving them and guiding them in a way that is going to make sense for them for many years to come. It's not always just about getting somebody into a house. And that's our goal, obviously.
Yeah.
We don't get paid if somebody doesn't buy a house. But for us both, I think it's more so about, does it make sense for this person right now? Of course, we want them in home ownership. That's always the main goal for many reasons. One, just the equity benefits.
The equity that comes with it, the stability that comes with it, the
Right.
security that comes with it. But at the end of the day, it's all about doing the right thing.
Right, and
for people.
structuring it in a way that makes sense, where it's like, hey, could I get you across the finish line today? Yes, potentially, but if we just work out this plan and go, hey, let's pay these debts off strategically, I'll be ready in 60 days and I can get a rate that's this much lower or whatever. Looking at those big picture items has really served myself, but also our clients really well.
Absolutely.
So I really do respect and appreciate that. So I think we touched on all of our big points that we wanted to touch on, but I think it would be fun to just make some predictions now for our update in March so that we can either come in here and eat crow or celebrate again. But I'll start, I think, for me. I see already the agents in my office talking about multiple offer situations, both from buyers they're competing with and listings that they're sitting on. So I think pending some huge financial disaster, we're going to see that to continue to ramp up, and I think it's going to ramp up rather quickly. I think we're going to see by spring break here, people are really back out in the market, moving and grooving, and that it's going to be that really great time where if you've got a home to sell, let's price it right, let's market it correctly, and it's going to sell quickly and or in multiple offers, and then finding that perfect home for you with the limited inventory, whether that be pre-existing or new construction. I think we're not going to be in a 22 market, but we're not going to be in a 23 market, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I'm probably going to botch the phrase, but something along the lines of it's always darkest right before the sun rises or something like that.
Darkest before the dawn.
Yeah, darkest before the dawn. Right now we're in the daytime of the nighttime.
Yes.
But I
Winter
really...
is coming. Winter has came and gone.
Yeah, winter came and did. I do think that's kind of where we are. And I think December 23, January 24, this is kind of the bleakest that it's going to get. And we're very close to the market really turning, really rebounding. And 2024, being a very functional and productive year, and so, I think by the end of the year, the odds are pretty good that we've gotten pretty close to 6%. Obviously different people qualify for different rates based on different circumstances, but just all things being equal in a vacuum, we're probably pretty close to 6%, maybe even into the fives by the end of the year. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that data shows that for every 1% drop in interest rates, 5 million people qualify to purchase a home. Now, that doesn't mean that all 5 million will.
Right.
It just means that from a qualifying perspective, you've got 5 million people who qualify if they want to buy a house, if they choose that option, for every 1 point drop in rate. Well, we're probably going to see rates drop from October 23 through the end of this year. That entire 12, 13-month window, we're going to see rates probably drop over 2 points. So we're probably looking at in excess of 10 million people qualifying to purchase a home over the next 12 months or so.
Right.
Which is a good thing, but it's also going to kind of begin to return us to that world of chaos.
Right.
So that's why for our clients, people that I've had pre-approved for months or people that you've had looking for months, it's kind of, now's the time.
Right.
If
you were waiting for prices to drop, you will be waiting for winter again. And not like the actual season. We're not going backwards.
No.
There's too much pent-up demand in our area specifically.
There's too much pent-up demand. There's too many household formations. There's too many people moving to this state. There is particularly for, the Austins, the Houstons, the San Antonios, the DFWs, these areas, it's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. Now, the good news that comes with that is that means that if you're living in those areas, you're where people want to be.
Right.
Which has immediate benefits and it has long-term benefits as well.
Right. So if you don't like anything we're saying about that, we can also look at rural property and
Absolutely.
USDA loans. Because I know that's the other side of the coin for Texans is it's like, okay, that's great. We're making a ton of money, but get all these people out of here. There are options.
There sure are.
Okay, well, I think that about wraps us up unless you have anything else you want to add.
I feel pretty good about this. I guess my big prediction that I'll make with spring training right around the corner is that the Rangers will repeat as World Series champions in 2024.
A girl can dream. Awesome. Well, we'll see you in March.
Thank you much. Enjoyed it.
Yeah.